In this video, I'll be talking about how a simple walk in nature changed my life. I used to feel like I was drowning in my own anxiety. It was like I was treading water in a stormy ocean, with the waves of my own thoughts crashing over my head. Every single day was a fight against a mind that wouldn't stop racing, and this awful feeling of being totally disconnected from my own life. I honestly had no idea that something as simple as putting one foot in front of the other could change everything. This is the story of how a walk in nature didn't just calm me down, it helped me find a sense of peace that I thought I had lost for good. For years, my world had been shrinking. It happened so slowly, I barely noticed at first. But eventually, I was living entirely inside my own head. My whole reality was just the four walls of my apartment, the glow of my computer screen, and the endless, mindless scroll on my phone. And running through it all was this constant humming anxiety that was my shadow from the moment I woke up until I finally fell into a restless sleep. And this just wasn't worrying, it was a physical thing. My body felt like a soda can that had been shaken violently. The pressure building inside me with no way to release it. It was a tightness in my chest and a burning energy in my limbs, and nowhere to go. My mind was a nonstop storm of what ifs and worst case scenarios. It was like the worst radio station in the world was hardwired to my brain, a loop of fear and self-criticism I just couldn't shake. All the eternal noise just completely disconnected me. I felt like I was watching my own life from behind a thick, soundproof pane of glass. Conversations felt muffled, and other people's laughter sounded like it was coming from a million miles away. I was disconnected from myself. I didn't even recognize this person who was so scared of everything. I felt like a ghost in my own body, just going through the emotions. Life stopped being something to experience and just became a checklist of things to endure. In the modern world, with its constant pangs and pressures to always be on, just threw gasoline on the fire. I felt overwhelmed and completely lost. I tried everything, meditation apps I couldn't focus on, self-help books with advice that felt impossible, and that daily promise that tomorrow will be better, which I broke every single morning. I hit a wall. I was quietly, desperately, and was starting to believe that this anxious, disconnected life was just my new normal. My turning point was the day that everything started to change. Wasn't a good one. It was the worst, actually. The walls of my apartment felt like they were physically closing in. The anxiety was a roaring fire, and it felt like it was about to burn me down completely. In a moment of what I can only call pure, desperate instinct, I just had to get out. Not for any big reason, but just to escape the crushing pressure of being inside. I threw on my shoes with no destination in mind. I just walked out my front door, my head down. My mind a chaotic mess, like a snow globe that had been violently shaken. The first 10 minutes were awful. Every step felt weighted down with lead, and the voice of my anxiety was just as loud outside as it had been inside. I thought, this is pointless. It screamed, go home. But I didn't. I just kept walking. And then slowly, something started to shift. It wasn't a choice. It was like my senses, which had been stuck on static for so long, started to tune into a clear station. I heard the crunch of dry leaves under my shoes. It was such a simple sound, but it was real. And it cut through the noise in my head. I looked up and actually noticed the way the afternoon sun was filtering through the branches, making patterns on the sidewalk. I stopped. I felt a cool breeze on my face for the first time all day. I took a real deep breath. It didn't fix everything, but it was a moment of quiet, a tiny island of calm in the ocean of my anxiety. I kept walking, but now I was paying attention differently. I started noticing the little things. Moss on the stone wall, a bird with a twig in its beak. These weren't life-altering sights, but they were real and present. They were like a heavy anchor, pulling my focus out of the storm in my head and grounding me in the world in front of me. This act of just paying attention, what some people call mindfulness, it's like using a camera lens. Instead of trying to see the whole chaotic scene all at once, I focus on one small detail. And the noisy background just blurs away. I didn't know that's what it was called then. I just know for the first time in forever, that volume of my anxiety had been turned down. That walk wasn't just a magic pill. It wasn't a magic pill, but I found a crack in its armor. I had found a flicker of hope, and that was more than I had in years. That first walk became my lifeline. The next day, when that familiar feeling of anxiety started creeping in, I knew what to do. I put my shoes on and walked. Walking in nature became my medicine. It was my way of dealing with what felt undealable. With every walk, it became more intentional. I eventually learned that what I was doing actually had a name. In Japan, it's called Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. The idea is simple. You just immerse yourself in the forest atmosphere. Science has shown it can lower stress hormones like cortisol, reduce blood pressure, and boost your mood. I wasn't just wandering anymore. I was actively taking part in my own healing. The transformation was slow, but it was deep. The biggest change? My perspective. Being in nature is like looking at a map of a whole city after being stuck in a single traffic jam for hours. When you're standing next to a tree that's been growing for a century, your own problems, which felt so huge and all-consuming, are put in their proper place. They didn't just vanish, but they lost their power over me, shrinking down to a manageable size. This regular practice started to rebuild the connection I'd lost with myself. My mind had felt like a cluttered, stuffy room for years. The quiet of the trail was like opening a window, letting a fresh breeze in that cleared out the dust and gave me a space to think. I felt like I was part of something bigger than my own anxious brain, a part of the web of life that I was watching all around me. That feeling of belonging was the perfect antidote to the loneliness that anxiety creates. Over months, this healing process seeped into every part of my life, like rain on a dry day. I started sleeping better, My mind felt clearer. I was no longer just surviving each day. I was actually starting to live it. Nature wasn't a temporary escape. It was showing me a new way of being. It taught me about resilience. That after every storm, there's a calm, and after every winter, spring comes. It was a complete restoration of my mind, body, and spirit. If you take one thing away from my story, let it be this. Healing doesn't always have to be this huge, complicated process. Sometimes the biggest changes comes from the simplest actions. For me, it was just putting one foot in front of the other. It wasn't about climbing a mountain. It wasn't about finding whatever nature was accessible to me. It was about finding whatever nature was accessible to me. A way to make us feel better. It's powerful and a free tool we all have. I want to ask you something. What's your relationship with nature like? Have you ever felt that sense of calm wash over you during a walk? Or felt your problems shrink while looking at a sunset? I would genuinely love it if you shared your own stories or feelings in the comments. Reading about each other's experiences is how we build a community and remind ourselves that we are not alone in these struggles. And if you find this story helpful and want more content about finding a little peace in our crazy modern world, please consider subscribing. What this journey taught me is that when you feel lost and your own mind feels like your enemy, the first step back to yourself might literally be right outside your front door. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a map. You just need a walk. You just need to open your senses, let the world in, and trust in the simple, powerful act of walking in nature. You have nothing to lose and a world of peace to gain.